The Joe Rogan Experience.
Let's get into, we briefly touched on weight cutting, but I know that the UFC has recognized that there's a real issue. And what steps have we taken to try to mitigate the problems that are caused by weight cutting?
Yeah, it's interesting. And another one of the reasons why I love the Performance Institute and the staff that we had there, and that before them, and it really stemmed from the USADA program where under the WADA code, you ban the use of IVs. And so, because I was kind of the point person, obviously.
Explain why IVs are problematic.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the cyclists. They were using IVs to basically flush their system of drugs to manipulate their biological passport. So if they're blood doping or using EPO, and it would have a tendency to lower those and normalize those biological passport levels. And so WADA learned that through some of the investigations that were conducted, and determined that IV use in excess of 50 milliliters every 6 hours would be prohibited. So when we announced that we were adopting the WADA prohibited list and prohibited methods, there was some blowback within the UFC community saying, hey, these things are used regularly because fighters are pushing themselves to the edge to make weight. And do you understand what you're doing here? You're going to put fighters in unsafe positions where they're going to get in and not be rehydrated. So we took a look at that and spoke with USAD, and he said, hey, maybe we should slowly roll out the IV ban. So we actually delayed that by 3 months. The program went into effect July 1st. And we instituted the IB ban October 1st. So we had 3 months of getting fighters prepared for it, educating them why that they were banned. Nevertheless, real quickly, the whole weight cutting issue came kind of into my plate. And while I wasn't an expert in it, I had to get out and talk to a lot of fighters, camps, coaches about IVs and give them alternatives to rehydrating the right way. And so I, again, not being an expert myself, I reached out to what I found were experts in the world. A certain guy by the name of Dr. Robert Kennefic, who is a PhD exercise physiologist, works at the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, studies environmental effects on soldiers, his expertise being dehydration. So soldiers in the Middle East that are marching for hours, days upon a time, run out of water, dehydrate themselves. How do we get these fighters back, or these soldiers back rehydrated and back into the fight? And thought, hey, this is the type of expert that we need to talk to. It's extreme dehydration, not, some kid that has diarrhea and is mildly dehydrated with some Pedialyte. So we brought him in, had him actually the week of UFC 200. He was in town, got a chance to talk to a lot of the fighters coming in and analyze the messes they were using. He recommended to us, hey, here's the maximum amount of weight fighters, that you should recommend fighters are losing that fight week. And that's how we came up with our weight guideline of 8%. So we recommend when those fighters check in Tuesday for a Saturday fight, they're within 8% of their goal weight, usually on Friday. Not a requirement, a recommendation, but, we put that out there and educated heavily on that. Since then, you talked, I think, last week about Andy Foster, the executive director of California, who's really taken the lead in terms of commissions on, combating dangerous weight cutting. He worked with us pretty closely on developing his 10-point weight cutting plan to combat serious weight cutting. Includes his commission making calls to fighters on the card 30 days out, 10 days out, making them a little bit more accountable farther out than fight week. He's also got a provision where fight night, he takes the fighter's weight, weighs them, and their recommendation is you only put on 10% of your weight back on plus a pound. If they're over that, California can recommend the fighter move up a weight class. So really, yeah, just a lot of, education, recommendations. And I hear a lot of people talk about, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this. Hey, we can stop this instantaneously. Just put rules out there. If you lose this much weight or put this much weight back on, you're suspended for 6 months, 12 months, whatever. We're just not going to let you fight. My concern there is when you have absolute rules, fighters are going to do everything possible to make weight. Say you had a rule that if you miss weight, you can't fight again for 12 months. You have to move up a weight class. Fighters are going to kill themselves to make weight. My fear would be that you put an absolute rule out there and someone hurts because of the rule that you put in place, which is, hey, I think it's a measured approach. You have to continually reevaluate it. But I think right now, the rules that are out there between our recommendations, California's rules are more guideline recommendations, and then that in conjunction with what we're doing at the Performance Institute, where, you saw last week, there is no excuse if you have issues making weight or you're not sure what your weight class is at. You have every resource available, the best in the world to you, to come in and find that out, to be given a plan on how to safely make weight. So it's a multi-million-dollar investment that the UFC has put, I think, toward that problem. And hey, maybe 2-3 years from now we say, hey, that was with good intentions, but not enough. We need to do more. But I think right now, that's our strategy on the issue.
Well, I think a couple things would have to happen to really stop weight cutting. One thing, you're going to have to blow up these weight classes, because there's going to be champions in these weight classes that really won't be in that weight class anymore if you cut all the real heavy-duty weight cutting out of the picture. I think what ONE FC is trying to do is they're doing hydration tests, and they do a series of them. I believe they do 3 leading up to the fight, which really... Was it Benavidez was telling me this? Someone was telling me this, that they've essentially made it almost impossible for you to cut weight.
So are they doing hydration tests on weigh-in, at the weigh-in?
They're doing hydration tests 3 different times.
Okay.
3 different times leading up to the fight. I don't know the exact protocol, but what they've done is essentially made it so that you can't be dehydrated. Like, you can't, when you weigh in, you have to weigh in at like if you're fighting at 170, but you get on the scale and you're fucking dying.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, no, you're not really 170. Like, and that's really where it should be. This idea that the best way to fight is to cheat and to drain all yourself of fluids and then pretend that you're 160 pounds, then get back on the scale, 15 hours later at 185, that's fucking crazy. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You're not really a 160-pound fighter. You're a 185-pound fighter who almost died.
Yeah. It's interesting. I talk with Forrest a lot about this because he went through it, and again, why he's such, a great asset to the company. But he says, look, there's certain guys and girls that have genetic ability that carry, that have good muscle mass usually, that just carry a ton of water, and it's not difficult, it's not dangerous for them to drop 10 or 15 pounds.
It's not, but it would be if they fought 15 pounds under. See, if they're fighting at 170 pounds, they really weigh 185. And if they cut down to 170, they make that weight, and then fought right then it would be dangerous. Their performance would be radically diminished. So we're lying when those people get on the scale. When they get on the scale and they flex and they say 170, sure, you're 170 for about an hour, and then you're going to go right back up to what you were before you dehydrated yourself. This is madness to me. And this goes against what fighting is supposed to be, what we talked about before, about discipline and focus and technique and training. That's what competing is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about a fight where 2 equally skillful individuals try to figure out who's got the best strategy and who's got the best will and technique. It's not supposed to be about who can do this legal cheating thing best, because that's what weight cutting is.
Well, really the modern history of the UFC, and the reason I think it's so successful is Lorenzo and Dana ran toward regulation, right?
Yes.
They said, hey, this is marketed as a no rules, no hold bar event. They ran toward rules. And so I think, what you're talking, and I actually had a discussion with Bob Bennett about this, executive director of Nevada.
He's great.
Last week. And, he's looking at what California's doing. He says, look, we have physicals after the weigh-in. So, we do the weigh-ins now at the host hotel. So it's usually done in a ballroom. Fighter gets up on the scale, makes weight, immediately goes behind the curtain and has their pre-fight physical.
Right, but do they have a hydration test?
They don't. I know California does some hydration testing fight night, but what Bob told me is I have the most experienced ringside physicians in the world that have seen more, combat sports events than everywhere. I'm comfortable that these guys are evaluating, these medical professionals are evaluating these fighters in this scenario, and that if they feel or see something's not safe for that fighter to compete the next night, that they'll call them off.
I think that's wonderful, but I think all that does is keep fighters from getting to the point of death. I mean, getting to the point where they're sick and terrible. They're definitely compromised. When they're making the weight, they're not really at that weight. What I would really love in a perfect world, besides the bare knuckle thing, what I would really love is a weight class every 10 pounds. Just have every 10. I mean, there's just giant gaps. The gap between 85 and 205 is 20 fucking pounds. That's a lot of weight.
I hear that, but let me give you a scenario where it shows that alone ain't going to work. Female, new division for the UFC, 125, right? Because we had a 115 to 135 pound gap.
Right.
What happened in our first championship fight? Sajara Eubanks couldn't make weight. She wasn't even, so that in and of itself, just making a weight class, I don't think solves the problem.
Yeah, but she's also relatively inexperienced, young to the sport, and this is a brand new weight class that they really didn't have. I'm
not saying more weight classes wouldn't help, but they're not going to help by themselves. It's got to be a multiple prong attack.
I think the hydration test should be along with that. The hydration test and weight classes every 10 pounds, and then give the champion the benefit of the doubt. Like whoever is a champ in each division, whatever weight class. What we find out what they really weigh, and they have an opportunity to fight for the title in that weight class.
Yeah, I think we talked about it when you toured through the PI, but we have on a couple of occasions used that bioelectrical impedance machine to determine, is that the proper term?
I don't know.
But basically you step on the scale and you hold on to these handles and it gives you, some type of hydration reading. We've done that a few times on check-in day, weigh-in day. We're not sure exactly what the numbers look like, but that's something that we're looking into. Clint also does a lot of specific gravity testing fight week on fighters, where it'll be a Tuesday or Wednesday, and I think he showed you that chart. He'll look at how much weight a fighter has to lose, and then look at what their specific gravity reading is, how diluted or concentrated the urine is, and if he sees someone with a bunch of weight to lose that is, relatively dehydrated, specific gravity-wise, then, it can alter their plan. So, yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of that stuff going on. I don't necessarily disagree with you that more needs to be done, but right now our plan of attack is to use these resources, use the facility at the PI. In an ideal world, I think rather than making these absolute rules, trying to educate our fighters, trying to show them. I tell you one thing, you can talk till you're blue in the face about things being bad, unhealthy for a fighter. They're like, I'm bulletproof.
Not only that, they're fighters. Like they're fighting. That's bad for you anyway.
Right.
Like, cutting weight's bad for me too? Okay.
Where they start listening, and I think this is where the Performance Institute comes into play, when you start talking about the effect on your performance. So if you tell them, hey, look, if you can come to your proper weight in a more measured approach and not lose a whole bunch and put that look at the difference it's going to make on your performance 24 to 30 hours later, because you see this. I mean, you see this occasionally when fighters go through tough weight cuts. You see them
Rafael Dos Anjos
gas after a round or two. Right.
Look how good he's looked moving up to 170 pounds. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
I also think now it's interesting. There's on one side of it, the criticism will be, well, you're just encouraging even greater weight cuts and regains. But I think this morning weigh-in thing that we've put together, I think has had a positive impact in a couple of areas.
Explain that for people who don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so actually Andy Foster, again, California, before UFC 199, came to me and said, hey, we've been doing this morning weigh-in for a couple regional local shows. Would you guys be interested in it? Where we do it at the host hotel. We do it, we'd open the scales from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And the idea would be a fighter gets on weight in their hotel room upstairs, hops on the elevator, steps on the scale, they make weight, they can start eating and drinking again right away. With the idea of...
They don't have to wait till 4 p.m. in the afternoon.
Exactly. With the idea of, I think one of the dangers of, weight cutting and being dehydrated is the amount of time that you're at a loss of that water. And in the past, when we'd have the weigh-ins at an arena, it would be the fighter would have to check in downstairs. Say we had the weigh-ins at 4 o'clock in an arena. The fighter would check in downstairs at maybe 2. 2:30, the bus would leave. I remember in Rio, we were one time on a bus for an hour and a half to the arena. Everybody's depleted and dehydrated on the bus ride. You step on a scale in a cold, environmentally unfriendly arena. You then get back on the bus, drive another hour and a half. You're talking multiple hours where these fighters are in a depleted state. So I think the morning weigh-in protects against that. I think the other benefit we've seen out of it, and I think it's more of a long-term than a short-term benefit, is we've seen a lot more fighters missing weight since we went to the morning weigh-ins. And I think that's a product of timing, in that in the past you had 4 or 5 in the afternoon, you had all day long to cut weight. And you would see fighters at 10 or 11 say, I can't do anymore. And at 1 or 2 o'clock, they say, I can do a couple more pounds, and just all day long. Now, unless you're literally not sleeping the night before you fight, you have a shorter window in the morning to do that. And I think a lot of those missed weights has helped identify those fighters that I'm probably in the wrong weight class. If I can't make that weight of waking up, 5 or 6 in the morning, a couple hours, then it's probably too much weight to lose. And we've seen some fighters move up in weight class because of that.
We've also seen some fighters that have decided, hey, I got to take this more professionally and hire a nutritionist, like Khabib Nurmagomedov, who made weight easily for his last fight. And the fight before that, obviously, he fell out of the fight because his body shut down and he had to go to the hospital to be rehydrated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution. You have to be careful. Hey, Khabib missed weight that last time, went to the hospital. A knee-jerk reaction would be, you can't fight at this weight anymore. Well, we saw this time, he just changed the way he did things. He came in, he was on weight the night before. He had a couple pounds to lose fight week.
Yeah.
So it can be done. And again, that reverts back to the Performance Institute. I think there's no excuse now that if you're a new fighter and you're not making a hell of a lot of money and don't have the resources to hire, a George Lockhart, whoever, have Clint Wattenberg, who's an Ivy League educated sports dietitian that can provide you all that remotely. If you can't get to Vegas, he'll give you a full plan over the phone, over email. If you can get to Vegas, not only will Clint plan things out for you, but you have a kitchen and cooks and staff that'll provide you that meal throughout your whole fight camp.
That's
if you want
amazing.
to be there for free.